Since childhood, I have always been drawn to spooky things. As I grew, I developed a sensitivity to the paranormal, although it wasn't always exciting. Certain occurrences made me reconsider how much I wanted to fully engage in that world. The story started when we relocated to a new home at around 8 or 9 years old. My bedroom was situated at the top of the staircase, an ideal location to experience all the drafts and strange noises that the ancient house could produce. Right away, I began to regularly have sleep paralysis episodes at exactly 3 a.m. Strange whispers and eerie noises would fill the room, and I would sense a presence, as if someone were sitting on the edge of my bed, just out of view. I informed my mother, but she attributed it to the stress of moving and suggested that I not scare my younger brother with scary stories. One night, my cousins came over, and my oldest sibling, known for entertaining everyone, had them engrossed in a horror movie in his room. In that instant, I recognized that I was trapped in my unsettling situation. In the late hours, I was roused from sleep by the sound of a giggles coming from the room next door. Believing it was my brother who had left my door open, I remained motionless in bed, unable to make a sound. Slowly, I became accustomed to the dimness, and I noticed the digital clock showing 3 a.m., the time that appeared to attract supernatural beings. Next to my bed was a girl wearing black attire, with long dark hair. Her unsettling intention drew her nearer, possessing a ghostly aura. I was overcome with fear, trying to shout but unable to make a sound. I covered my head with the covers, praying intensely to overcome the paralysis. When I was able to control my body again, I yelled for my mother, who quickly came in with worry showing on her face. Following that evening, the occurrences of sleep paralysis heightened. I saw faces emerge from the shadows, causing me never-ending agony. Desperate for peace, we had the room blessed not once, but twice by a priest. Yet, the disturbances persisted. Eventually, I pleaded to move downstairs to a room with garden doors that opened to the quiet sanctuary of our backyard. It felt safer than the noisy, creaky aluminum door upstairs. For a time, things settled down, especially after our housekeeper gave me blessed images to hang on the doors and windows. A last-ditch effort to ward off whatever malevolent force plagued us. However, the break was brief. When I was 13 years old, I traveled to the United States to assist my older brother with a renovation task. Although in a foreign land, the same feeling of dread resurfaced. At 3 a.m., I woke up to a frightening sight one night when the clock chimed. A man stood next to my brother's bedside, his eyes locked on him with a menacing grin. Initially, I believed it was my brother, feeling drowsy from flu medicine or some nighttime sickness. However, when I woke up completely and asked my brother about the thing, or person, he was looking at, the man looked at me, then returned his gaze to my brother, who was still unaware as he slept deeply. Afraid, I closed my eyes for a moment, and when I looked again, the man had disappeared completely. The following day, as I ran errands with my brother, I could no longer keep the encounter a secret. I shared what I had witnessed, anticipating him to possibly ignore it as something made up in my mind. However, he admitted to also having glimpsed the girl in our old house, consistently brushing her off as a figment of imagination. That's when it hit us both. These weren't mere hallucinations or overactive imaginations. Something far darker and more unsettling was intertwining our lives with its malevolent presence, spanning across homes and continents. The encounters weren't random or coincidental. They were a chilling pattern that defied rational explanation, leaving us to confront a reality where the line between the living and the supernatural blurred in terrifying ways. Please like and subscribe if you are enjoying. I'm Claire Miller, a medical student in the quiet city of Bangor, Maine. During my internship at the hospital, I was assigned to perform autopsies on 3 bodies. 2 of them, in particular, stayed engraved in my mind. A big guy and a little boy around 10 years old. But the terror didn't stay only in the cold autopsy room. After finishing my shift, I went back home tired, but with a human anatomy project to finish. It was already late when I started drawing the muscles in my notebook, trying to finish before the sun rose. The clock on the wall kept ticking while I got lost in the details. As the night went on, something strange started to show up. Next to the table, there was a sofa that was occupied by something I couldn't see, but could feel. A tall, big presence, seeming to be lurking there, with crossed legs and relaxed arms. I tried to convince myself it was just fatigue, but the feeling of not being alone in the room kept increasing. Trying to distract myself, I turned up the music. But once the song was over, I caught a faint childlike breath by my ear. I felt a shiver down my spine and I trembled. I felt a problem but didn't have the courage to address the individual on the sofa. I quickly shut the notebook, powered down the laptop, and hurried out of the room, sensing the presence trailing me around the house. I recalled my mother's suggestion to pray during tough times while sitting in my room. I shut my eyes and, feeling nervous, requested for any unwelcome presence to leave, expressing gratitude for allowing me to study the bodies. But even with the prayers, I felt something in the darkness, just watching. The following days were full of agony. Every time I entered the study room, a chill ran down my spine. The feeling of being watched wouldn't leave me, even during the day. I was scared and doubtful, not understanding why those presences wouldn't go away. I didn't tell anyone what was going on. How could I explain that there was something invisible following me around the house? Only I knew the truth, but I knew I couldn't continue like this. One night, trying to sleep, I felt a breath close to my ear. A voice spoke some words that I didn't quite understand, but with a sense of urgency. I was paralyzed with fear, trying to ignore the invisible figure next to me. If those entities couldn't be seen or heard clearly, how could I get rid of them? My mind started spinning with theories and assumptions, but no definite answers emerged. That's when everything changed. The room's temperature suddenly dropped. A relief mixed with a shiver ran through my body, as if the presences had suddenly disappeared. The room fell into a deep silence. I don't know how long I stayed there in that unexpected peace. Finally, I fell on the bed exhausted and emotionally drained. The invisible presences that tormented me seemed to have gone, leaving only the unanswered mystery. Since then, my life has returned to normal. I continue in medical school, but now with more caution when dealing with bodies. Sometimes I still look at the empty sofa next to the table, remembering that night of silent terror. I don't know what those presences were or why they decided to appear. Maybe I will never understand. But one thing is certain. That experience changed my view of the world, showing that not everything has an explanation. When I think about the summer between 2016 and 2019, the thing that comes to mind is a sudden break in the calmness of our coastal village. My name is Emily. I am 16 years old, and we live with my parents together in one of those old houses close by to the seaside. The soothing sound of waves hitting the beach and the shimmering stars above eased us into slumber every evening. Keeping my bedroom window open at night and leaning against the stone wall with a view of the beach was a habit I faithfully followed like a ritual. The salty breeze and the starlight always brought me peace. That night, I opened my eyes to gaze at the sky. A sense of unease woke me, something I had never felt before. That's when I saw it. On the roof of the house next door stood a tall, slender figure. Its body seemed covered in black fur, more shadow than physical presence. Its eyes glowed in the moonlight, fixed on me, causing a discomfort I had never experienced before. My body froze. The figure tilted its head towards me, a slow, calculated movement. I felt a shiver down my back. I hurriedly shut the curtain, yet the memory of that creature stayed imprinted in my mind. The feeling of being watched stayed with me as I woke my younger sister Lily beside me. Trying to explain what I saw, I whispered so as not to wake our parents in the next room. Lily, initially skeptical, saw genuine fear in my eyes and agreed not to open the curtain again. The next morning brought temporary relief. The sea was calm. My parents investigated my claims but found nothing but shadows and the night wind. I insisted that something strange inhabited the rooftops at night, but no one else believed me. From that night on, I started sleeping with the light on. fearing the creature might return to watch me through the window. Days passed slowly, and I tried to resume my routine, but the feeling of being watched never disappeared. Each night was a battle to sleep. I found myself staring at the window, hoping not to see those eyes again. My grades started to drop, and my mother suggested it was just stress. Deep down, I knew something was wrong. A week later, while walking along the beach at dusk, I saw strange marks in the sand. They were footprints, but not from any human or animal I knew. Long and thin, with fingers stretched like claws, I followed the marks until they disappeared into the rocks near our house. I ran back home, heart racing. I told my parents, but again, they found nothing. The following nights were worse. The sound of waves, once reassuring, now seemed ominous, as if hiding secrets. One night, I woke to a strange sound coming from the roof. Something was crawling over the tiles. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but the sound persisted. I grabbed a flashlight and, trembling, slowly opened the curtain. There it was, the creature, this time closer. Its eyes gleamed intensely, and it seemed more solid, more real. I screamed, and my parents rushed to my room. But when they opened the window, there was nothing, just the wind and darkness. After that incident, my father decided to install cameras around the house. He wanted to prove there was nothing strange, but the next night, as we reviewed the footage, something disturbing appeared. On one of the cameras, we saw a shadow moving swiftly across the roof. My father, skeptical, said it must have been an animal. I knew it was the creature. Everyday existence became too much to handle. Lily began experiencing bad dreams and would wake up shrieking, claiming she sensed a presence observing her. My parents were worried about our emotional well-being, but were unsure of how to help. The creature appeared to be aware of our vulnerability and solitude. Its presence started to show up more often and in a more daring manner. I was suddenly woken up during the night by a loud noise coming from the lower level of the house. I went down the stairs quietly to prevent making any sound. I saw the kitchen's back door swinging open in the wind. I rushed to close it, but felt someone or something behind me. I slowly turned around and saw the shadow moving across the room. It happened inside our house. I quickly went back to my room and secured the door upon my entry. The slow and heavy steps on the stairs grabbed my interest. I grabbed the phone and called the authorities. Upon the police's arrival, they discovered no trace of anything. There are no indications of a forced entry, and no hints or leads available. Only our frightened expressions, pale and full of fear. From that point forward, my parents finally trusted me. We made the choice to depart, in search of a more secure location. However, the fear continued in the new house. The sensation of being observed never completely went away. Until now, I still wonder about what I actually witnessed that night and the subsequent nights. Was the creature actually existent? Or maybe it was a reflection of a more profound fear that resided in my thoughts. The sensation of being observed never fully went away. I still feel a chill running down my back when I look at the starry sky and hear the waves. I am uncertain if I will ever discover the truth, but one thing is certain: the presence on the roof changed my life permanently. I remember a summer that we had just a few days to complete the exams before going for holiday. There was talk about strange happenings in a Devon pub. That summer happens to be 2019, a year that will forever be remembered by us. My name is Jack Turner, and this is my story. We were having lunch at the university cafeteria, having just completed our final exams, eagerly awaiting our year's most anticipated grades. It was then that our friend Paul, who had dropped out halfway through the course, came to visit. Amidst our conversation, he recounted what he described as the worst experience of his life. Strangely, his demeanor didn't reflect the deep disturbance or fear one might expect. Nevertheless, we listened intently. Paul spoke of a pub where he had briefly worked, rumored to be cursed. According to him, the owner had struck a pact with a malevolent entity, and each new employee would encounter a spirit that would leave them traumatized. Initially, we mocked him, doubting the seriousness of his claims given his nonchalant demeanor, as if recounting a drunkard's tale. Despite this, he continued to share his story, though his credibility waned. Curious, I inquired about the pub's location. Paul disclosed it, but cautioned us against ever going near it. He seemed the only one taking the matter seriously, albeit in a detached manner. When he left, we ridiculed him, some even insulting him. On the day our exam results were revealed, our joy knew no bounds. But our elation was short-lived. On our way to a pub to celebrate, we received devastating news. Paul had taken his own life. His mother found him hanging in his room early that morning. Our happiness evaporated instantly. We were left speechless. Guilt washed over me for the way we had treated him earlier that day. It was too late to realize he might have been genuinely troubled. In his room, Paul's mother discovered a note warning against going near that cursed place. 2 days into the holiday, Lucas, one of our friends, informed me he had secured a job at the very pub Paul had warned us about. This angered us, feeling it dishonored Paul's memory, but Lucas paid little heed to our concerns. A week later, Lucas returned with a similar tale to Paul's, delivered in a mocking tone. I recalled how it started with Paul, and how it tragically ended. I urged the group to take Lucas seriously, but he brushed off our concerns, joking about the pub and everything else, much to my irritation. Eventually, I chose to ignore him. 2 days later, the news arrived. Lucas had taken his own life in a gruesomely familiar manner. It became clear the pub harbored something inexplicable, yet lethal, claiming the lives of those who worked there in horrific ways. We swore never to set foot in that place, yet it seemed to beckon us. One night, under the pretext of grabbing a drink, I ventured there. Inside, I found my friend Sarah working. I pleaded with her to leave. In the midst of our conversation, an elderly woman in black entered and took a seat in a shadowy corner. Sarah excused herself to attend to the woman, but when I glanced over, no one was there. Sarah proceeded to serve drinks to the empty chair, as though serving an invisible patron. A chilling sensation gripped me. Something dreadful felt imminent. I persisted in urging Sarah to quit, but her demeanor shifted drastically. She became playful and sarcastic, even mentioning in jest how liberating it might be to end her own life. In that moment, I realized the old woman was influencing her. I warned Sarah's parents, but they dismissed my concerns. 2 days later, Sarah, too, took her life. In our small town, rumors attracted the curious to experience the horrors themselves. Many friends perished in ways I cannot fathom to this day. When I recount this, many accuse me of falsehood. I urge them to research the dance plague of 1518, a reminder that there are mysteries in this world beyond our comprehension. Seated at the bar in the pub, I pondered the mysterious deaths of my friends. Life carried on, but I was still haunted by those dark memories. While being handed a beer by the bartender, I pondered on the eerie atmosphere of the establishment. The bar exuded an old-fashioned atmosphere, its inside seeming to transport visitors to another era, as muted lighting cast dancing shadows on the walls. The rest of the customers seemed average, but I couldn't shake a feeling of unease. I tried to ease my discomfort by talking to the bartender. I inquired about the pub's past. He brought up its century-old presence and laughed about its reputation for being haunted. While listening, I observed a black-clad elderly woman sitting in the corner of the bar, her gaze intense. I felt a chill down my back, and I turned my head, only to be drawn to look again. She disappeared. I questioned the bartender about her, but he claimed not to have seen anyone. Heart racing, memories of Paul and Lucas flooding my mind, I tried to rationalize, convincing myself it was mere imagination. Finishing my drink, I decided to leave. The rain poured heavily as I walked through the deserted streets, an eerie sensation of being watched haunting me. I turned a corner, glimpsing a fleeting shadow. I halted, searching for its source, finding nothing. Despite my dread, I pressed on, finally reaching home and locking the door behind me. Yet my sense of security was short-lived. Nightmares plagued me, visions of the lady in black with her hollow eyes and macabre smile. I woke drenched in sweat, convinced something was amiss. Fetching water from the kitchen, I glimpsed her outside the window, freezing me in terror. Drawing the curtains, I tried to convince myself it was a dream. Days passed, yet the sense of being watched persisted. Every glance out the window seemed to reveal her figure. Family and friends dismissed my fears as exaggeration or suggested I seek professional help. I began avoiding leaving the house, fearing her presence. During a sleepless night, a peculiar noise in the living room jolted me awake. Investigating, I found flickering lights casting an unreal glow. In the corner stood the lady in black, eyes fixed on me, a smile playing on her lips. Before I could react, she vanished. It became clear the pub and the woman were somehow intertwined with me. Wherever I went, she followed. Terror consumed me, reality blending with nightmares. I woke in the dead of night, certain she stood beside me. Even outside, her presence loomed, watching me. I was raised in a small coastal town in Maine, in a house that was said to have a secretive and long history. It was a large old house built on land considered holy by native tribes before the settlers came, as told by the elders. My grandparents brought up Gideon, Ophelia, and me in that same house. From an early age, we noticed something strange about the area, but we could never pinpoint what it was. My grandparents rarely discussed the past, yet their silence and significant glances spoke volumes. The initial moment of profound distress came to me during a summer night when I was 12 years old. Walking from the kitchen to my bedroom, a man took a seat on the worn leather armchair in the living room. The man had on ripped jeans, a gray shirt, and a blue cap down in his face. I paused briefly while my heart raced before deciding to move on without acknowledging what I had just witnessed. The next morning, I informed Gideon and Ophelia, and much to my astonishment, they too had witnessed the young man on numerous occasions. "He's always around," Ophelia commented, "but he never acknowledges our presence." Yet Gideon had never laid eyes on him, further enhancing the enigma. Weeks went by, and the young man kept showing up. He remained still, never changing his position, simply sitting there. We were not scared of him. It felt like he belonged in the house. However, there was another entity that bothered us even more. A senior man, wearing a long coat and a felt hat, often showed up at the windows, peering into the house. Every time he showed up, I noticed his cold, vacant eyes. At night, I woke up abruptly, sensing a presence in my room. I opened my eyes only to find an elderly man standing by my bedside. We made eye contact briefly before he whispered some words. I got up from bed, my whole body soaked in cold sweat, and yet there was that unusual calmness about me which persists till this day. I never told anyone about it, but his image has been imprinted on my mind ever since. A few days later, my brother Nathaniel was hanging out with his friends, checking out the cliffs. He slipped, tumbled, and forcefully hit his head. He was quickly taken to hospital, but unfortunately he succumbed to his injuries. We immediately visited the hospital to bid farewell to Nathaniel after hearing the news. At that time, I noticed a troubling detail. He was dressed in worn-out jeans, a gray shirt, and a blue hat identical to the young ghost that everyone, except Gideon, saw in the living room armchair. In the following days, the young man's presence in the chair increased. He seemed more genuine, more tangible. One night, I was alone in the living room, and I felt cold. Then I looked at the armchair, and it was one time when the youth moved his head. His blue cap tumbled down, showing Nathaniel's pale, blank face. Moving backwards away from this piece of furniture made it fall over. Trembling from head to foot, I quickly rushed into Ophelia's quarters, where I found solace only to narrate her this incident. But she kept on saying nothing while shaking her head and eyes full with tears. "He wants us to know something," replied her after wiping off her tears. "We must understand." The days that followed were of terror mixed with fascination, revealing Nathaniel more vividly with each appearance. We tried to approach him, tried to speak to him, but received no response. That all changed that night when I was alone in the living room and felt a cold hand touch my shoulder. I looked back, almost terrified, and saw the old man wearing a long coat standing right behind me. His face was still emotionless as he approached and whispered words that made no sense at all. This time, however, I experienced a severe headache and lost consciousness. Abruptly, I regained consciousness in the hospital with Ophelia and Gideon beside me. They were pale, worried. "You had a fall," the doctor said. "It was a hard blow, but fortunately, no serious consequences." I didn't really understand what had happened. They said I had fallen, but I don't remember anything. When we returned home, the atmosphere became even heavier. The presence of the elderly man and Nathaniel was almost tangible. We felt we were being watched constantly. During a rainy evening, Ophelia proposed that we make a final attempt to comprehend the situation. We collected every item we owned that belonged to Nathaniel and positioned them around the armchair. We lit candles, then sat quietly, anticipating a signal. The room was cold and dark, lit only by the candles flickering. Suddenly one candle went out, then another, leaving us in complete darkness. Soon after, we listened to a gentle noise resembling the sound of footsteps being dragged. I felt my heart racing out of control when I noticed the armchair was vacant. Nathaniel, the young man, had disappeared. In the corner of the room, the old man's figure was more clearly visible than before. Slowly, he neared us with his vacant gaze locked onto us. He halted by the armchair and reached out his hand, as though attempting to make contact with an unseen object. Afterwards, he spoke in a voice that felt otherworldly, stating, "He is now resting peacefully." After that, the elderly man vanished, and the room became quiet. The candles reignited on their own, and the armchair returned to being merely an old piece of furniture, devoid of any ominous presence. Years have gone by since that evening, yet we still remember what took place. The empty house on the Maine coastline remains standing. The past of the place is surrounded by rumors that prevent anyone from daring to live there. The experience served as a solemn acknowledgement that there are some things beyond our complete comprehension. The lingering influence of Nathaniel and the elderly man continues to disturb us today. Thanks for watching until the end. Subscribe and like so you don't miss any videos.